Okay, the purpose of this video is to introduce you to basic contouring makeup. This is more traditionally referred to as corrective makeup. I personally have a lot of issues with the term corrective. I think that it implies that there is something wrong with your face, and that's not the case. When we say corrective, what we're talking about is actually correcting what stage light does to your face. Stage light flattens and takes all of the dimensionality, right? All of the visible features off of your face. And so the goal with corrective makeup is to correct for that, not to correct your actual face. This is not to say that you can't do minor corrections on your face if you want to. The great thing about contouring is that you can actually use it to sculpt the way your face looks. So if, let's say, you feel like you have a really high forehead and you want to kind of downplay that feature, you can use contouring to do that. And so there will be a second video following this one, which will show some of those techniques that are more focused on single areas. For this video in particular, I'm going to do the two traditional versions of basic contouring makeup or basic corrective. The traditional versions are masculine and feminine. And you can probably tell by my use of air quotes and the tone of my voice that I don't really like that. I think that we have gotten to a place in society where we can finally say there's not just one look for female or one look for male. And unfortunately, these old school makeups are definitely geared more towards saying that women look one way, men look another way, and that's that. I'm not a big supporter. So the reason I continue to show you this, despite not being a huge supporter of that particular concept, is because for those of you who have never done any makeup before ever, I think it's a little bit easier to access if you have a scripted version of what the makeup is supposed to look like, basically. And you can choose. You can do the feminine version. You can do the masculine version. I don't care. I'm not going to say that you should have chosen one over the other. My goal is that you understand why we use certain shapes for certain looks and where that came from, but I don't think that you should feel like you're locked into it. So with all of that said, I am going to go ahead and jump right in and start doing the makeup. The makeup itself, I'm going to do one half of my face with the traditional female, one half of my face with the traditional male. And so you see, I've got a clean, moisturized face. I have my handy palette, my handy spatula, and here is my Ben Nye foundation. So what I'm going to do is use this spatula. I'm going to scrape a little foundation out of here, right? I have about that much on my spatula. You can see that's actually not a lot of makeup. It's probably more than I need. Get that onto my palette. And then I take one of my sponges. This is the other thing I like to show you. So I basically never use my cosmetic wedges the way that they come in the package. I tear them in half every single time. I like the way that they work. They fit my hand better, and I have more control over everything I do when the sponge is smaller. So I highly recommend doing this. The first thing you're gonna do is apply foundation to your face. This foundation is really thick, it's really creamy, and so I definitely recommend as you do this, if you feel like it's not spreading well, add a little moisturizer. The moisturizer is going to help thin it out and help kind of make it a smoother application. In my case, I just moisturized my face, so I'm not super worried about getting this on here. And I hope you can all see the difference that the foundation makes. It's really tough sometimes on camera. But notice how I'm kind of working in small areas at a time. I'm not putting big chunks on my face. I'm just doing a smooth, light application of foundation over my whole skin. I'm getting up underneath my eyes, going all the way back to my ear, down to my jawline and slightly under my jawline. All right. Over my chin If you're worried about streaks or lines, you can do what's called buffing. That's when you do this, you roll it in circles, and that'll help buff out any streaks or lines that the foundation might leave behind. Right. The goal for this isn't that you look like you wear foundation, it's really just to even out your skin. So I get it all the way up to my hairline here. Over my eyelids, down my nose. Alright, so just make sure I really get that jawline as well, and blend down onto the neck. You don't want to go too far because let's say you're in a costume and the costume neck is a little bit higher. You don't want to get makeup all over the collar. It looks terrible. And your wardrobe crew doesn't thank you for it. So blend a little onto the neck, but not a lot. And you can see, I kind of talked about this before with the old school theater color choices. You can see how this actually adds a little bit of pink to my face. That is just old school lighting. Streetwear foundation is totally acceptable for this, and it will look completely different. It'll match your skin tone a little bit better, but this works for the purposes of the class, if nothing else. Okay, so I have my foundation on, and I actually used all of that amount that I had, so pretty good, pretty solid estimate. So I have a makeup wipe here with me, and I'm just going to take a second to clean off my spatula. Assume I'm doing this in between every time I grab a new cosmetic color. That's just for sanitation purposes. It's a really good idea. You can also use like a Clorox wipe or pretty much anything, even a tissue if nothing else presents itself. Since you're working out of your own kits, it's all right to use a little extra. All right, so there is my contour. Again, I'm just going to find a spot on my palette that's clean, and I'm going to put my contour color on there and clean off my spatula so I don't get makeup everywhere. Okay. And now I'm going to pick up a new half of sponge. All right. So now I have a clean sponge. And you'll notice I work back and forth between my sponges a lot. And I'm going to, what I like to do is actually lay all of my contour down first, right? So I'm going to start with this basic feminine side of the shape. And one of the things I want you to notice, this basic feminine corrective, this kind of traditional feminine corrective, the goal was always more rounded features, right? Bone structure in females tends to be rounder. Jawlines tend to be softer. It's not always 100% true. There are exceptions to every sort of generalized rule, of course. And so I don't want you to think you're locked into just using these shapes. I just think this is an easier way to access how the makeup itself works and what you're trying to accomplish. And in this case, what I'm trying to accomplish is to enhance my features, but not change them, right? I just want a natural looking face with dimension. So I'm going to start, and going from the tragus right here, we talked about the tragus and the facial anatomy. I am going to make kind of a streak into my cheek hollow right there, right underneath that cheekbone. And then I'm going to flip my sponge around to the clean side, and I'm going to start blending that contour line out. And I've actually placed my contour a little bit too low here, but that's okay, because now I can go back to my other sponge that still has foundation, and I can take some of that away. Kind of move my contour a little bit higher up here. Right? That's the other thing I really want you to get from this. If you don't do it right the first time, it's easy to fix. Cream makeup moves and changes really easily, so you have a lot of room to play. All right, so I get that on. I'm going to do a line of contour here around the edge of my forehead. If you have a really short forehead or a really low hairline, I don't recommend adding this contour because it's just going to make your forehead look smaller. But that is personal choice, and you kind of have to play with some of this to see what works for you and what doesn't. Right, and then I am going to, starting right at my earlobe, but just underneath the jawbone, I am making a jaw contour line. Again, flipping my sponge over and taking a lot of care to really blend this away, right? There's a tendency to forget to blend the jaw contour, particularly by the ear. And if you don't blend it, we can see it. Right? And nothing says fake faster than a straight line. So keep that in mind. And I'm actually going to go right underneath my chin, and I'm going to continue to create that jaw shadow, add extra jaw shadow. In my case, I like a lot of jaw shadow because I have a heavier jawline and I have kind of a double chin, so by adding that shadow, I'm taking away from that appearance. Okay. And I just blend that down. So those are my major contour areas that I would do with a sponge. For the smaller contours, I'm going to use the brush that came with the kit, and I've picked up just a really small amount of this contour on here. And then you notice I tap the brush, I don't swipe. And then I'm going to move to a clean spot and I'm going to tap some of the excess off. The thing with contour is it can get away from you really fast. If you use too much, it's super, super visible, and that's fine if you're in the Metropolitan Opera House. That doesn't work in most stage spaces. It's too much. So what you want to do is actually start with less contour than you think you need, because you can always add more later, but taking away a lot of contour is going to be a lot harder. All right, so I'm going to contour my nose, and I'm just going to come down the side of my nose here. And in my case, I like to accentuate the tip of my nose a little bit because I like the shape of my nose. So I'm actually going to go around underneath a little just to reinforce that shape. And then I'm going to very carefully take my sponge and blend that, right? So hopefully, if the lighting in here isn't too terrible, you can already see how some of this contour is starting to define out the shapes of my face, how this side of my face is more defined than this side of my face now. And that's just by adding a little bit of shadow. I haven't even added a highlight yet. Right. Okay. And then finally, going back to my little section of contour here, I'm going to add just a little bit under my lip. And I do that because it kind of makes your bottom lip look a little more apparent. It really reinforces that and also helps define out your chin if you want to define out your chin. This is an optional contour section. You don't have to do this, but I've always liked the way that it looks, so I do it on myself. All right, so other than eyes, this is all of the basic contouring that you would do on the female side. We'll get to eyes last, so that we see the difference between the male and the female eye. I'm going to move over now to the masculine side, and there are some slight differences in how this contouring works on the masculine side. So traditional masculine is based on the idea that men are square-jawed and strong rectangular features. Again, this is based on sort of traditional biological bone structure. If you are male, then more often than not, you tend to have a squarer face, just in terms of how your bone structure fills out. Again, exceptions to every rule. This is not true for everyone. So you really have to get good at analyzing what your own face looks like and what's going to enhance your face and what's not going to enhance your face. And that's probably the hardest part of all of this, is figuring out what does and does not work for you. Okay. So again, starting right around my tragus, I'm going to come in, but now I'm going in a completely straight line across underneath my cheekbone. Part of this is because I actually have a very traditional feminine face, right? My features are really rounded. And so I'm having to cut more across than I would if I were actually a man, or if I actually had a square bone structure in order to make that square shape. All right, I'm going to bring it up a little bit higher. And then at the very front, I'm going to tail that down a little bit. I'm actually creating a square shape. See that right there? But you don't want to go all the way down to your jawline, so be really careful of that. And flipping around to the other side of my sponge, I'm going to start blending that contour a little bit and reducing how visible it is. All right. There we go. Okay, got that one in. Now I'm gonna do my temple contour, right? So that's gonna start here. Like this is my temporal fossa, the hollow right here. So it's usually, you can kind of tell from the corner of your eyebrow. And what you wanna do is go straight up toward that receding line and straight back. You're creating a triangle, more or less, into this temple part of your hairline. I'm gonna fill. And now that I've more or less got that in there, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna soften those lines that I drew. Because I just want this to appear, this is the thing about contouring, you want it to appear as a shadow. It's not an actual drawn shape, it's a shadow. You're faking light patterns on your skin, right? We talked about light, shadow, and contouring. This is the effect of that, where we're using color in place of light. All right, so on the male side, starting at this receding point and kind of following down where my frontal eminence is, I'm going to go ahead and start this U shape. Now, if I were doing my whole face masculine, this would go all the way over to my other receding point and it would actually outline this whole U. And then again, just softening that line, blending that out, making a shadow, not a line. Okay, so I get that. And then again, starting underneath my earlobe, but now I'm going to draw a straight line down. And I'm going to cut across and draw a straight line right on top of my jawbone. With the goal of making my jaw look more square than it is naturally. And once I've done that, I am going to go ahead and soften out and blend my contour lines. So you should actually be starting to see how the two different sides of my face look like they have been sculpted a little bit differently. Certain features are becoming more prominent versus other features. Now, on the feminine side, I went all the way underneath my chin. On the masculine side, a lot of times I won't do that because I'm trying to make a really square cut. So I'll actually go up here to the chin, I'll draw a straight line across, and then I'll do the same on the other side. And when I say across, I really mean right there, right on the edge of that jawbone. But for this case, I don't really need to do that, so I'm not going to. I'm just gonna fill that a little bit. All right, so you start to see that more chiseled jawline from doing something like that. And you notice I left this jawline a little bit harder than I did this side, which is a little bit softer in terms of how I blended it. Again, based on traditional gender roles and not something you have to do, just it's an easier way to access this whole process. Same deal on the nose. It's the exact same type of contouring on the nose. You're gonna go straight down the sides, starting in this little area right here that meets up with your eyebrow. Although you don't want to connect your nose contour to your eyebrow, if you can help it. All right, and I'm just gonna go straight down the sides of my nose and contour that in. Go back and blend. Okay, so then I get this overall look. There is a little bit of a favorite thing that used to get done. They would make this little dimple in the chin for masculine contouring. It still gets done in opera a lot. So you can go ahead and do that if you want to, but don't feel like you have to. I actually have a little bit of a dimple there naturally, so I sometimes fill it in just for fun. Another thing in masculine contouring that you wouldn't do in feminine contouring, you would actually paint a little right here above the lip. All right, and again, blend that shadow out. So by doing that, I'm actually starting to fake a natural 5 o'clock shadow. That's the goal behind putting that. It also emphasizes the lips, but it makes this part of the lip look a little thinner and a little less apparent. And not always, again, not always, because faces are different no matter what you do. But in general, the traditional masculine look is a thinner upper lip. Okay, so now you see I have all of this contouring done here, which means I'm ready to move on to highlight. I'm just going to take a second and clean out the contour from my brush. This is a step people skip a lot, and then because you only get one brush with the kit, you end up with contour in your highlight, and then your highlight doesn't work. So clean your brush. Okay. Taking my little spatula, I'm going to find my highlight color, which is going to probably be way too pale for me. If you feel like your highlight color is really, really off, really, really pale, but your foundation color is pretty good, mix your highlight and your foundation together. It'll work a lot better. That's the best advice I can give, short of going out and buying the correct highlight. And again, like I've said before, I'm interested in you getting the makeup on your face and getting the shapes in the right places. I will always be there for shows to correct your color choices if need be. Okay, so going back to one of my torn sponges, again, using a clean half of a sponge, I am picking up some highlight and patting out the excess. Highlight will get away from you really, really fast. Too much highlight is so easy to happen. So just be really careful and layer rather than swatching a ton of highlight onto your face. Okay, so traditional feminine side. Highlight always goes where there's contour. So I'm gonna go on top of my cheekbone here, but I want you to notice my highlight and my shadow don't meet. Right, there's skin in between the two. And then I'm just gonna blend my highlight. You see how fast highlight reads? Reads really, really hot, really, really fast. If you have really, really dark circles under your eyes, you're gonna actually take your highlight underneath. It's kind of like concealer. And that will reflect light and kind of help minimize those dark circles. Okay. Then for feminine, I would actually go in and I'm gonna destroy my U here by doing this, but just so you see, I would actually make a circle kind of right here, right above the brows and down to the bridge of the nose, and round this out, bringing it up to that forehead contour that I added. And the goal here is to round out that forehead. I'll take a little bit of highlight. And I'm gonna go right above where I did my jaw contour. I'm not gonna go all the way to the chin. I'm just rounding and emphasizing this corner of my jaw. Right. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do nose highlight. You would do this on masculine or feminine. You just bring that highlight right down the center of your nose. and blend that out. Okay. So those are all the major highlights, again, except for the eyes. And like I said, we'll do the eyes afterwards because I want to be really clear. The eyes can get really tricky if you're not careful. Okay. So, I forgot to do, if I were doing traditional feminine, I wouldn't have that little dimple mark right there. And I would go underneath and just highlight my chin out a little bit. Not a lot. I don't want to make it look super prominent, but just enough so that you know that it's there. And to kind of play up that shadow that I created. Okay. For the masculine side, again, I am going on top of the cheekbone. I'm leaving the skin between that contour and that highlight, and I am just bringing that in a straight line right across. I'm not really following that dip down. I'm just highlighting the top of the cheekbone. And I'm not going to bring highlight into this eyeshadow because I don't want to make this side of my face look rounder. I want it to stay square. And if I were to bring highlight under here, I would emphasize the roundness, not the squareness. Okay. I'm going to add my highlight here in between my temple contour and my U shape, my brow bone contour. And now I'm just gonna sketch that U back in there a little bit, just so that we can see that a little more clearly. Yeah, that contour or that highlight is so white. All right, and then I am going to put the highlight right there, right next to where I've done the U. Right, to really emphasize that more prominent brow bone. Okay. And then finally, straight line down. And straight line across. Just like that. It's going to emphasize that squareness. If I still had that little chin dimple, which we'll put back in, I would also take and add a little bit of highlight right there. But you notice I don't go up to this part of my chin. It's just right here at the edge because I want to make my chin look more prominent and more squared off. All right. So hopefully now with this 2 different sides of contouring, you can actually start to see the difference in the face shapes and what that does, how that cuts your face differently. Now let's move on to the hard part, the eyes and the eyebrows. I like to start with my eyebrow. I feel like I can't really judge my eye fairly until I have my eyebrows in. So one of the best ways to figure out where your eyebrows are supposed to sit, you can take your pencil, put it right at the side of your nostril, and in a straight line go up to where your eyebrow hairs start, and you're just gonna make a dot. All right. And then you wanna go at a more or less a 45-degree angle. And again, right where your brow actually sits, make another dot. That's the arch of your eyebrow. I'm a little high, so we'll just make that go away. And go kind of right there. Now I'm gonna make that dot. And then I'm going to go from my nostril to the corner of my eye, to the corner of my eyebrow. And I'm going to make that dot again. So now I have a map for where to pencil. As you do your eyebrow, you're just sketching very, very softly. If you can see, I'm not drawing a line. I'm picking my pencil up quickly and sketching like I have individual hairs. Now I have really, really pale, very thin eyebrows, so I have to actually add my eyebrows in order for them to be visible. If you have really visible eyebrows, if your hair is really dark or your eyebrows are really thick, you won't need to do this much work. You can actually just kind of do a little filling in places where the eyebrow is a little bit thinner, and then you'd be done. There. And now, since I have these dots, sometimes I'll go back in and I'll kind of try to get rid of them with a brush or something. I'm not going to worry about it too much for this video, but you don't want to have a visible dot in your eyebrow, especially not at the end, since that should kind of taper off into a point. Right? I can do it the same way on the male eyebrow, but I'm actually really used to doing eyebrows, and so I'm just going to go in. The male eyebrow, the traditional masculine eyebrow, generally doesn't arch as much as the feminine. The feminine eyebrow tends to scoop up and really open the eyes super wide. The masculine eyebrow tends to be straighter across. And again, hopefully you can see how I'm not drawing one big line. I'm just filling with light pencil strokes. So that tends to be straighter across. The arch is closer to where you draw your U shape for that receding area. And then you bring that out. I also don't usually do this in pencil. I am a big fan of eyebrow gels and pomades, and so I tend to use those versus pencil. But since your kit comes with a pencil, this is how you would more or less do this with a pencil. So you see the difference between these two brows. This is much flatter. It goes kind of straight across and then hooks down. This actually goes up into an arch and then comes down. Now that I have my brows on, I can go ahead. I'm going to just sharpen my pencil here really quickly. All right, now that I have my brows on, I'm going to go ahead and do my eye makeup. I start with my eyeliner. For the traditional feminine side, it's like a cat eye, right? And so where that corner of my lid is, I'm going to come down to the corner of my own eyelid. And if you can see this, I'm basically making an upward slanting diagonal. And I'm not touching the actual corner of my eye, right? And then I'm going to go about 3/4 of the way across. So I'm making that eye. What I'm doing here is creating an artificial lash line, right? So a lot of times this actually gets done with black eyeliner, not the dark brown that comes with the kit. So just so that you can see it a little bit better, I'm going to take one of my black eyeliners. And I'm going to pencil that in. Doesn't have to be a perfect line. The goal is just to fake your lash line. Right. So what that does is that starts to open out the eye. You could use the same black underneath, or I'm going to go to dark brown again. And again, you're starting about 3/4 of the way in. So if you were looking straight on, it's right about where the corner of, the edge of your iris is. You're going to go just under the lash line, and with light pencil strokes, sometimes, especially if, like me, you have a lot of under eye wrinkle, it's a little bit easier to kind of pull the skin taut and do this. And you're going to just draw a straight line out. All right. So what this does, it makes the eye look wider and rounder, because all that skin underneath now is kind of like the waterline of your eye. So if you can see, I haven't gone all the way up to the edge of my eye. I'm actually just underneath it. And the goal is to open everything up and make it look so much wider. Once I have that in, I'm going to go back to my trusty contour. And using the flat side of my brush, I'm going to go to where I have drawn this artificial eye line, and from the very corner, I'm going to create a new crease. So I'm not sitting in the natural crease of my eye where my eyelid comes down. I'm going just above. And I'm not going all the way in. Again, it's about 3/4 of the way. And I'm creating a new crease in my eye. Then I'm going to come back. I'm just slightly blending that with the very edge of my sponge. I don't want to blend this too much because I actually want it to read more like eyeshadow or an eye crease. I want it to be visible. All right. I'm going to even take some of that black pencil and smudge it into the edge to hopefully make that look a little more natural. This will never look that natural. The traditional feminine side is all about making women look very made up. Again, something I'm not crazy about. I think it's okay to look more natural than this, and powder shadows make it a lot easier to make this look natural than the cream colors do. Okay, so I'm out of highlight on my palette, so I'm going to pick up some more highlight here. Clean my tools. Clean my contour out of my brush. This is why I highly recommend having multiple brushes if you can. And now I'm going to take this highlight and I'm going to go from the corner of my eye inward. And I'm going to put that highlight underneath where I just created all that shadow. And again, the goal with adding all this highlight is to make my eye look larger and more open. And you'll notice I've actually done it on top of where the highlight is, on top of where my natural crease is, and then I have my fake crease right above that. If I want to, I can go back through and emphasize that fake crease a little bit more. Just depends on what you want to do. And once I have that in, I'm going to go and using the very edge, right, the very front edge of the brush, I'm going to put a line of highlight underneath where I drew my eyebrow. And I'm going to let that blend down towards where I did my fake crease. What I want to be careful to do is not get the highlight all the way on top of the fake crease, because I want to create this big open eye. If You really need, if you're in a really large space and you really need this to look open, you can actually put a little line of highlight underneath where you drew that eye corner. And again, that's going to open your eye a lot more, make it look bigger, wider, more open. Okay. And then finally, we'll do a few finishing touches here on the feminine side. So I'm going to take a little bit of this more muted blush color and put that on my palette. And then I usually mix this using my highlight sponge. I don't bother with a new piece of sponge for this. So I'll take that little bit of blush. I'm going to start on the apple of my cheek. And I'm going to add some color back into my face. Right, one of the things you've probably noticed is that by doing all this contour and highlighting, there is no color left in my face. It's very monotone. You want to add life back in, so blush is a must. You're going to come around. You want your blush to sit between where your contour and your highlight are. And just warm up. You see how much warmer that side of my face now looks just by adding a little bit. Be careful. A little tiny bit of blush goes a very long way, very fast. Another trick that you can use with this, go in where you put your contour in, and in the front edges of your contour, actually add some of that blush in there too. Right? Because you've made it look like there's no, this is really thin skin around your eye. And by adding all that contour and highlight, you've actually made it look like there's no blood moving there. But if you add a little of this blush back in, it brings it back to life and makes your face look a little more alive, a little more open. And then I will often use this same blush color if I feel like my lips are really, really pale, which today they are. And I'm just going to add that onto my lips. I'm not trying to look like I'm wearing lipstick here. I just want a little bit of color and life. All right, so I add that color back in, I add that life back in. And then my personal favorite, and a huge, huge favorite in the industry as a whole, Carmex. It's got that menthol in it, so it kind of plumps your lips up and makes them look really nice, but it's also shiny and it keeps them moisturized, which as an actor who's talking a whole bunch on stage, you probably want to feel like you got moisture in your lips, right? So add a little Carmex. Now my lips look more alive. This whole side of my face looks more alive than this side of my face right now. We'll come back to this side of the face in a second. And finally, mascara. All right, you're just gonna get that mascara on those upper lashes. You can put it on your lower lashes too if you want. I pretty much only do the upper lashes when I'm doing stage makeup because I don't want to close the eye off. And if you add too much dark around the bottom, you can start closing the eye off really fast. Okay, so there's the basic feminine side, pretty much complete. So you can see, I hope you can see when you look at this, how much rounder this side of my face looks versus this side of my face, which is much more square, much more open, right? So now getting to the eye on the masculine side. More often than not, we do not line the upper lid on on traditional masculine makeup. We only line underneath the eye. And we don't even really line. What we do is actually a series of tiny dots that aren't fully connected. Right? And you don't want to go all the way to the corner. You just want to get like a teeny tiny amount. But you can see just by doing those few dots, it starts to make that eye look more apparent, more readily open, more visible. So I'm going to skip the top liner. We do contour that eye a little bit. You got to be really, really careful. The tendency we're used to seeing, we have to think about it like this. As a culture, we're really used to seeing women wearing makeup. We are still adjusting to the idea of men wearing makeup, although it is way more common now than back in the day when I was in school. So you have a lot more options in that respect, which is actually kind of great. Everybody benefits from makeup. I'm sorry. Like, as a makeup artist, I think we all look better with a little makeup on our faces. But anyway, that's just personal opinion. But I think that that's what has been the fear in a lot of companies, a lot of houses. They think like, oh my God, if you put makeup on men, they look super made up, and then it gets into cultural stereotyping or gender stereotyping, and that is a whole other ball of wax that I'm happy to unravel with you guys at some point, but hard to do in this video. So if you're gonna do, anyway, I've gotten off track here like always. Getting back on track, we're going to do this contouring, but you want to be really careful to keep it light so that it doesn't read as eyeshadow. And what we do for this contouring, you're still going just ever so slightly above the crease, the natural crease of the eye, which you can see in my eyes. You see that fold right there, right? I have a pretty heavy crease, so it's really, really easy to see where this goes. This is not always... I can't close my right eye to do makeup because I'm blind in my left one, so this is going to be a little more complicated. But you're kind of just going right above that, and you're going in a straight line out towards where you've put this tail of your eyebrow. Right? You can kind of see. Hopefully you can see the difference that makes, that it just kind of gives a little oomph to the eye. And then I'm going to just be really careful about blending that, because what I don't want to do is blend it too far out. If I blend it too far out, it's going to look like eyeshadow and not like a painted crease. So that's kind of how you do that traditional masculine eye contour, right? And that's pretty much it. Like, that's all the guys really ever had to do. So again, you see where I'm like, oh, gender inequity, cool. Women look super made up and have to do a lot more work on one side of their face. Men do less. Although you guys make up for it with a little more contouring work. So anyway, try to stay on topic here. These videos, I really get lost sometimes. I don't care who you are. Wear mascara. When you are on stage, the number one thing you can do for your face, you could skip all this contouring. You'll probably have to fill in your eyebrows. I don't know a costume designer anywhere who's not going to tell you to fill in your eyebrows unless they're really, really heavy and thick. But even if you're not wearing foundation, wear mascara. Mascara will make your eye look open more than any other thing. It will define your eye. It'll make it super visible. So wear mascara. This is the number one item in your kit apart from Carmex. Right? And you can use a dark brown, you can use a black. It just depends on your skin coloring and what you want to achieve. But you see, I'm adding this mascara, and do you see how just by adding a couple coats of mascara to the top of my eye is so much more defined than it was just a minute ago, right? That's the goal of mascara. So you do not have a makeup kit if you do not have mascara. You want this no matter what. All right. Guys, you don't escape it. You also wear a little bit of blush because, again, you've gone super monotone here. So you just want to make sure you get a little bit of blush in there. But unlike over on this side where I started on the apple of my cheek, you are going to put this right on top of, well, it's not really on top of, but it's right in between where your highlight and your contour are, right? You left a little bit of skin showing there, I hope, and that's where your blush goes. And it kind of follows that line in between and blends those two pieces together. You're gonna skip doing the blush in the eye contour because you shouldn't have that much eye contour on anyway. And then you would also do the Carmex, although maybe not adding the blush color to the lips. Just depends on how visible things are. But then you would add the Carmex as well, or any sort of untinted chapstick works great for this. And then this is basic contouring. So your final step is powder. All right. So I've got my powder. I'm going to tilt a little powder into the cap here, and by a little, I mean, I don't know if you can see this. The light in here makes it hard to see. I got a lot of powder in there, which is fine because you need a lot of powder. You are going to press your powder puff in here. Squish that together. If you have a lot of too much powder in there, you can always just give it a little flick and you see the powder come off of there. And then what you're gonna do, you wanna press the powder into your face, right? Don't worry about leaving visible powder. Like in this case, because this is such a heavy cream makeup, such a heavy application, I'm actually letting this powder sit on top of my face. Yep, even pressing it over my eye. Right. Everywhere that you have put makeup, you should be pressing powder. All right, and you see how I leave the powder a little bit splotchy in places, so you can actually see the powder marks? You want to do that, right? That's called baking. Essentially what you're doing is you're letting the powder sit on top of the makeup. The oils in the makeup are absorbing, probably didn't get enough on my nose here. The oils in the makeup are absorbing the powder, right? And what that is doing is actually setting the makeup in place so that it doesn't streak as much. It doesn't come off on costumes the way that it would if you don't powder. And then once I have let this set for a minute, I can take my powder puff, and now you really do want to make sure that you get some of the excess off of there. And now with a light flicking motion, I'm just going through and I'm wiping away that powder so that you don't see the powder marks. All right, now I've powdered, and what has happened is not only is my makeup set and more likely to last through sweatiness and all sorts of performance things, less likely to transfer to another actor's clothing or your own clothing, but what it has also done is it has diffused the makeup, right? Like when I first put this on, those lines looked really, really harsh in some lights. By adding the powder, you're actually diffusing that makeup out so that it blends a little more softly. It's a little less obvious. And that's your goal. You want it to be less obvious, right? Just by using that little bit of powder. Fun fact too, a lot of these powders, particularly theatrical grade powders, actually come with an antiperspirant in them. So when you put them on your face, it helps stop the sweating when you're on stage. It's not foolproof. It's not a ton of antiperspirant, but it helps. So powder, always, always, always powder. All right, thank you all for watching this, and I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, of course, please email me and we can talk through anything that you need to talk through. I hope that you can see the difference in these two sides. My next video is going to be a couple other techniques that you can use to change features of your face if you want to. All right.